Hello, my friends, and before we get started, I just wanted to say thank you. Today we reached 1,000 subscribers, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for being here, for watching the videos, for hitting the damn button. I know it doesn't seem like a lot, but it means so much to me. I can't even begin to tell you. I never thought that after I made myself make that first video and then keep making them, that I would ever actually get this far, let alone so quickly. I cannot express the depth of my gratitude to everybody who has gotten me here, and I look forward to getting further. Before I get any more mushy, we're just going to go ahead and get into the video. So today we're going to talk about a few different things. Stellar Blade is part of it, but realistically what we're going to talk about is the censorship that Sony has demonstrated over the years. I wanted to walk through a few things so that people who want to have more ammunition to use to prove that the idea that sex is being censored isn't what we're really upset about. It's a portion of it, but this is the straw that broke the camel's back. This isn't the whole hay bale. The whole hay bale is much bigger and more complicated and far more irritating to get down to it. As Graham says, this isn't about a few inches of fabric. It's about the double standard in gaming where Western studios get a pass on full frontal nudity, bare sex, and constantly shoving DEI in our faces, while Korean and Japanese games get the censorship boot. And it's not just the Korean and Japanese games. I will have examples of Italian games for you as well. It basically seems like any non-American games kind of get that, and we'll cover that. My dear friend Vex Electronica, if you haven't watched any of her stuff or caught any of her streams, you absolutely should. So check her out, check out her channel, and oh my God, so many streams she's on with so many great people. I would be making the video much longer if I sat here and named them all, but they know who they are and they know that I appreciate them because they are part of the reason I am where I am. But as she says, fucking women logic knows no bounds nor actual logic. It's one of the more frustrating things sometimes to be a woman in gaming, because you have other women out there who say shit like this. Here you have Jessica Coswell talking about, this is the most unhinged behavior I've seen in quite a while, and I have a 2-year-old. You know, about the petition and the hashtag, Grums's DM to the creator. Then, on the other side of it all, LOL, you know, supporting women sex workers on OnlyFans as a sexual woman is funny because you can tell when the orgasms are fake, but you absolutely respect the hustle. I am horny with respect. Monetize the male gaze, boo, get that bread, and look good doing it. On the other hand, if a video game studio tries to monetize that male gaze, then, suddenly they're the most evil people ever. How could they? They're objectifying women. I'm sorry, but so many women objectify themselves. If you don't want to be objectified, don't treat yourself like an object. But at the same time, a video game character is an object. It's not a woman. So it's not the same thing. Most sane people can differentiate the fact that what you're seeing on the screen is not a real person. It's right up there with the where are her organs argument. She's 2D. She has no organs. Have you not watched Futurama? And then, of course, you have the men who think they're cute talking about how anybody who supports this just doesn't get laid. You know, they've never touched a woman before. They've never seen a woman before. Many of us actually are women, believe it or not. They're right. I've never slept with a woman. I don't ever plan to. Not my type. However, I'm not for censorship. I am against bait and switch tactics. And that's what we have going on here. To some degree, Shift Up does hold a blame in that they absolutely bait and switched the gamers. Were they behind it, or was it Sony's hand? I personally believe it's a little bit of both, but I believe mostly the fault lies in Sony's hands. And now I'm going to show you why this is not the bale, but merely the straw that broke the camel's back. As my first piece of evidence, I would like to submit this article from FIRE, a free speech advocacy group. I definitely recommend you check out. Lou Perez is an amazing comedian. He does a lot of work for them. He has a funny commercial he did for them. But for now, we're just going to talk about video games as opposed to the rest of that. As you see here, it says, Lisa controversy highlights non-transparency and arbitrariness of platforms policing video game content. Demands to modify art to satisfy contemporary sensibilities never seem to age well. As with any other art form, the video game industry is no stranger to demands for censorship, but it seems current calls are coming from inside the house. In the latest incident, Microsoft, Nintendo, and Sony apparently required developer Serenity Forge to remove content from a pair of role-playing video games before their release on the company's consoles, and Sony asking for extra sanitization. While Sony and other platform owners have the right to set their own content standards, policing content based on unpublished rules and an apparent double standard in the application of these rules does not bode well for artistic freedom. What can't you say? Who knows? In short, Nintendo, Microsoft, and Sony are acting as gatekeepers. They grant the licenses for the games to appear on their systems. That means that the developers have to go to them and they have to be approved, and they modify as they see fit. They, of course, are free to have their content policies, but their content policies are vague, much worse even than the social media policies. But unlike social media terms of service, Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo's content policies are not available for public scrutiny, offering arguably less transparency than Twitter or Facebook. In a 2019 Wall Street Journal article, a developer complained that they lacked guidance in regard to what Sony would allow. "You don't know what they will say until you complete the work and submit it for review," said the chief executive of a small game developer in Japan. "If they are not happy, even if they allowed the same degree of sexuality a few days before, we need to take it back and ask our staff to make adjustments. That's very costly. We don't have criteria and written guidelines or that sort of thing because the policy was introduced kind of suddenly in the wake of the #MeToo movement," a Sony official said. This is another example of Sony bottlenecking the process. Not just Sony. Sony's not the only one that we need to pay attention to, but right now it's best to focus on one battle at a time. You win one, and the others have a tendency to take you a little more seriously in the future. Just keep in mind that even if we do win this battle, there may be more to fight. And of course, the article, make no mistake, intruding on developers' artistic vision is problematic regardless, but if a platform with a bottleneck control is going to do it, establishing clear and consistently enforced policies is the absolute minimum needed to ensure artists making games for your platform know what to expect. Not to mention, it helps them with costs. Imagine how much of our money is wasted, how much investment money is wasted, because someone decides one day that the game is too sexy and suddenly you have to go back in and patch some fabric in because it's just too much for the eyes. Definitive with a definite asterisk. Lisa Definitive Edition comprises Lisa the Painful and Lisa the Joyful, two independently developed role-playing games for PC about characters struggling to survive a brutal post-apocalyptic wasteland. The games cover many dark themes of violence, drug addiction, and abuse, and have developed a cult following and sparked extensive artistic critique. When Serenity Forge announced the collection is heading to Microsoft Xbox, Nintendo Switch, and Sony PlayStation systems, it noted it would come with content changes. Lisa contains sensitive content that is designed to move players out of complacency, to put them into a world that is absurd and inappropriate, and to prompt players to confront how they feel about these specific moments. We feel confident in the direction and purpose of Lisa's content, but we also know that certain platforms have regulations that we have to follow. Whether or not to make these changes was not easy to decide, but ultimately it became an exciting prospect to alter some content in small ways in hopes that it welcomes and includes more players. This is bothersome for a lot of reasons, but we won't discuss that this time around. Right now we're focusing on the censorship. Developers are certainly free to change their own games, but to the extent they do not freely make those artistic decisions, but rather have them compelled by platforms, there is cause for concern. As concerning as it is that Microsoft and Nintendo Store policies may have required Serenity Forge to sanitize its games, Sony's policies demanded additional changes for release on PlayStation consoles, as Serenity Forge explained. In a similar vein, a few more changes were made on the PlayStation, only in order to launch the game on that platform. But we're happy to say that none of them affect the meaning and intent of Lisa. For the PlayStation version of Lisa, we've added a notice about the protagonist at the beginning of the game. Additionally, cigarettes have been renamed to cigarette candy, joy is no longer referred to as pills, and alcohol has been renamed as soda in joyful only. Characters still drink alcohol in painful. Basically, the changes are not a big deal. We just wanted to make everyone aware of it in advance because we know that Lisa fans will notice it as a difference from the original games. Oh my god, some of these are so stupid. This article notes that this has been going on for a while. The Wall Street Journal reported in 2019 on developer complaints that Sony had begun to crack down on racier sexual content in games. As for the reason, anonymous Sony officials cited the increasing popularity and reach of the streaming platform Twitch and the rise of the Me Too movement in the US. Much of the content Sony has demanded removed has, in fact, been racy sexual content, but in another demonstration of the slippery slope tendency. In short, that content proscriptions tend to grow over time. It wasn't long before other objectionable content was on a PlayStation-branded chopping block. The subversive visual novel Doki Doki Literature Club Plus had a blood spray scene changed from red blood to a black ink-like substance. An Italian horror game, Martha is Dead, had interactivity removed from a scene involving mutilating a corpse. There's plenty more in this article. I will put the link in the description so that you guys can visit it, read the rest of it. Maybe check out Fire. It's worth your while to check out. We just mentioned a game that I had very much wanted to play, and maybe I'll play it for my 1K stream that I was thinking about doing because it's one I've been looking forward to, but I haven't had a lot of time to play. And I bought it on PC, so the censorship isn't there. Martha is Dead. One of the first videos I ever made was on this game that you will find on my Horror Amarada channel. I almost thought about clipping some of myself, but I decided I don't want to do that. And so this is Forbes trying to explain, Paul Tassi trying to explain why PlayStation is censoring Martha is Dead. Sorry about that. Now, this is by the developer Wired Productions, who I know does have the game Indica coming out this week. It's another game I'm actually interested in checking out. Wired does indie-related games, and I like horror games, so there's that. Here you see the statement released on February 11th, 2022, before the release of Martha is Dead. And here it says, Martha is Dead PlayStation Update. Martha is Dead is a narrative adventure recommended for adult audiences only, with play consisting of potentially discomforting scenes and themes that may distress some players. Both Wired Productions and LKA have always been open and honest about Martha is Dead content, with the sensitivity depictions in play consistently communicated to the media since the game was announced in 2019. This content is also flagged clearly and repeatedly within the game itself before play begins. It is with regret that we have had to modify the experience on the PS5 and PS4 versions, with some elements no longer being playable. After 4 years of passion and hard work, developer LKA now requires extra time to make these unplanned changes. Martha is Dead, as a result, will still launch digitally on both PS5 and PS4 on Thursday, February 24th, 2022, but the physical retail release will be delayed to a yet-to-be-disclosed date, although we anticipate this to only be a small number of weeks. Our physical edition will still contain the bonus content of a double-sided poster, digital tarot cards, and Martha is Dead digital EP. We will update players on the date we ship this edition as soon as we have the information. The PC and Xbox versions of Martha is Dead are both unaffected by these developments and will launch with the full unedited gameplay as planned. We look forward to players experiencing the work of LKA on Thursday, February 24th, 2022. Here you see Sony basically decided right before they were going to shove the game out the door that, no, you have to go back and recode these because we can't have this. And that is just a dick move. How many other games have had these problems now and we don't know it? How many other games have had delays and we've been blaming the developer, but it was actually Sony saying, no, you need to change this because we don't like it? These are questions we have to ask, and questions we should ask, and questions we should be able to get the answers to. Unfortunately, because of NDAs and so forth, we probably won't get the answers to them. But they are things to keep in mind. With any luck, we can hopefully discourage developers from working with Sony, especially independent developers, because at this point it's looking more and more like there is less reason for them to do it. I know for those of you where PS5 is your only console, that sucks, but it's either break Sony or find something else. It's our choices right now. And this says, so what is going on here? In 2022, what could cause Sony to say that a game goes too far and must cut content in order to be released? Surprisingly, it's nothing with sex or nudity, which in the US is usually the culprit. But if you really want to know, I should put up a content warning here for the description of graphic violence. I'll link the main scene everyone is talking about, but I won't embed it here. In short, what happens is at the beginning of the game, you wake up and you go outside and you go to the lake and you find your dead twin sister in the lake. and you cut her face off. I mean, it's a cool mini game. You use your mouse in the case of the PC to literally peel her face off. Now, I'm a very morbid person, so my excitement probably scares a few people, but I think it's cool. And of course, they go on to talk about how it's setting off a debate about violence in video games and blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, there's plenty of video games that are equally, if not more violent. Why? And honestly, someone explained to me the difference between watching it happen and actually playing the minigame. What is the difference there? Why is that a thing? Why is that an issue? In my opinion, it shouldn't be. But we got a few more articles to get through. Moving on. I don't know how many of you have played Doki Doki Literature Club. It is actually very amusing. It starts out as it seems like one of those, what's that word? It starts out as kind of a yandere simulator, but gets weird, and there isn't any actual sex, just murder, mostly, and some other weird things. If you haven't played it and you think you might be into these kinds of games, if you're into those kind of visual novel games, I do recommend it. It was a lot of fun when I played through it. See here, Doki Doki Literature Club creator Dan Salvato has revealed that one of the indie visual novel's most iconic scenes was censored in the recent PlayStation 4 release of the title's expanded edition in order to comply with Sony's content regulations. Salvato revealed the censorship on June 30th, the same day that Doki Doki Literature Club Plus released digitally for PC and consoles, in a post shared to the official Team Salvato blog aptly titled About Censorship. In the post, Salvato addressed fan concerns that based on the game content, DDLC might have certain parts of the game censored or otherwise altered in order to comply with the respective regulations of each platform. We feel confident in the nuance of DDLC's content, wrote Salvato, but we also know that certain platforms might have certain regulations that we wouldn't be an exception to. The indie creator then assured fans that he had already decided long ago that if it was required to remove specific scenes from DDLC in order to publish it to a platform, then I would not publish it to that platform, and stated that as such, fans could rest easily knowing that no scenes have been removed from the title's console release. However, this assurance that no scenes had been removed was not to say that they had not been altered in some instances, as Salvato proceeded to reveal that the PlayStation version of the game has some visual changes to one of the scenes. According to Salvato, the censored scene in question is the one which occurs towards the end of Act 2 in the classroom, just before the weekend starts, when Yuri confesses her love to the protagonist. In this scene, regardless of whether the player chooses to reciprocate or reject Yuri's feelings, the purple-haired member of the eponymous literature club will proceed to violently stab herself to death, eventually allowing herself to bleed on the floor of the club's meeting room. While this change was made in order to comply with Sony's policy, Salvato asserted that he had at least designed the changes myself and thus felt confident in them because I don't consider the psychological effect of the scene to have been diminished in any way. I wouldn't have accepted that kind of compromise. Basically, the change is not a big deal. I just wanted to make everyone aware of it in advance because I know that DDLC fans will notice it as a difference from the original game, he continued. I wanted to avoid a scenario where people would spot the difference and think that the game was unfairly tampered with by some other company. Noting how aside from the visual changes described above for the PlayStation version, some fans are worried that part of the essence of DDLC will be lost with it being ported to consoles. Salvato concluded his post by declaring that it comes down to this. If I couldn't make DDLC Plus without it being a worse experience, I wouldn't have made it at all. Now, looking at this, personally, I don't find it all that gruesome. So why would this need to be censored? Does it have to do with the individual person looking and asking for the changes? Who is making these decisions and how are they making them? Do they have any kind of hard-written guideline? Do they have any kind of firm guideline across the board? I'm looking at no. Looks like the answer is no to me. And we still have another one. Here we have Sony reportedly had developers edit and censor graphic content from Japanese games. A new report from GameSpark, translated by Reset Era, suggests that Sony had previously had Japanese developers censor graphic content from their games before being able to release it on their platform. For CyberConnect 2's Naruto games, Minato Namikaze's arm was originally supposed to be missing, but his arm had to be included as Sony Interactive Entertainment's prohibited limb defects in human-looking characters, even if they were corpses that had come back to life. What? Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, a scene which included Nappa cutting off Amatsuhan's arm, was speculated to be approved because of the different style between Dragon Ball and Naruto and the changing times. Ultimately, this means Sony takes violence and whether or not to censor it on a case-by-case basis. This also doesn't seem to apply to Western games, as both The Last of Us Part 2 and Ghost of Tsushima featured graphic violence, including limbs being severed. This tracks with how Sony used lens flares to block out a shot of Trish's bum in Devil May Cry 5, which was another Japanese-developed game. Meanwhile, the sex and laughter of it too. Oh my god. Anyway, yeah. So while this won't mean a lot for developers in the West or players in the West, it definitely seems like Sony is censoring certain types of content on the Japanese side, specifically heavy violence and sexual content. This is also apparently not down to Cero, the Japanese rating system, and came from Sony directly, which could be a way of Sony trying to avoid the regulator declining the release of the game, and Sony then having to resubmit it with the edited content, which costs additional money, time, and resources. Yet, I'm pretty sure plenty of Japanese games get through without that censor that aren't released here in the US. It feels like to me that Sony's trying to decrease the appeal of Japanese games for some reason. That's speculation. I have no proof, but I do wonder. The conspiracy part of my brain goes, maybe. But again, I could be wrong. Don't quote me. Or do. I don't really care. Finally, on the website fandom.com, there is a list of games censored by Sony. As this says here, this starts in 2018. This is by no means a comprehensive list. It doesn't look like whoever started it has continued with it, but it does definitely give an interesting picture of how much censorship Sony really does practice. And as you'll see, this says this does not include games which are only censored to conform with Cero, mentioned in the previous article. And I'm not going to read them all. They're here on the screen. I'll put the link in the chat if you want them. I mean, it's not a short list. It's not the longest list ever, but we also know it's not a full list. There are probably a lot of games that have a lot of changes that we don't know about because they can't talk about them. They didn't want to talk about them. And I do get the feeling to circle back to the very beginning of this whole video, I do get the feeling that what happened with Stellar Blade is they released the demo and then Sony wanted the changes. I definitely believe that. I also believe that Shift Up may not be able to tell us. I know there are people who are on the side of don't buy the game at all because Shift Up chose to work with Sony. They chose to deal with the censorship. I know people who say buy the physical copy only. I know people who say buy it no matter what because we want to support the fact that they did something that literally flies in the face of most of what the corporate gaming structure wants them to do. I leave that in your hands. Personally, I do want a physical copy of Stellar Blade. I will probably wait for it to come out on PC. I'm not even going to lie. I am a little bit of a PC master race person. I have the consoles, but I mainly play on my PC. Do what you think is right. Do what you think fits your morals best. But remember, this isn't just about Stellar Blade. When you get into these arguments with these idiots online, don't just talk about Stellar Blade, because that's what they want to do. They want to boil it all down to just the sex. And it is not the sex. And you know it. I know it. Some of them know it. Some of them are dumb and don't know it. Some of them don't care and just want to troll. Evaluate that on your own. But it's kind of like one of the first videos I made, where I talked about the fact that we need to keep pushing the fact that we want good games, good characters, that look good, that have good writing. We also don't want them censored. We want to see the art that the developers want to give us. We don't want to see what somebody else's opinion of what it should be is. We want to see the results of the freedom to create. We don't want this censored bullshit. That's the easy way to say it. We don't want this censored bullshit. We want to see the true creativity behind these games. It is these people who have no creativity, these people who have an agenda as opposed to any actual interest in gaming, that are ruining it for everybody. And it's time we make them stop. I don't care that the straw that broke the camel's back was a set of tits. I genuinely do not care about that. I do care that it's time gamers step up and deal with it. And I'm glad to see so much energy behind it. And I hope that we manage to continue it into the next thing and the next thing until they realize, if we want to stay in business, we better start giving them what they want, because that's what we all deserve. Even if it's games I won't play, y'all deserve the type of game you want to see. Again, thank you so much for the 1,000. I look forward to going on further with you guys. Thanks. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. Please like, comment, subscribe, and turn on the notifications. If you really liked it, you can feel free to share it around, and I will catch you later.